Hey, good afternoon and good middle of the night to everyone. We're here for the inaugural Bioclear show. And so we want to welcome our special guest, Dr. Nick Setti. And so he is coming from us all the way from the UK. We're excited to talk about the new Evolve matrices. And so Nick has been playing with these, and it's especially critical in the UK because I think you end up treating a lot of really deep decay sometimes. Is that right?
Oh yeah, we got proper British teeth over here. None of this A1 piano key stuff, Dave. We got real crowding, real caries. People eat as much sugar as you Americans. There's stuff going on all over the place here, man. Good to see you though, buddy. Always a pleasure to be on.
Always a pleasure. You know, it's because, you know, I'll show a case where I think that the decay is deep, right? I'm thinking, oh, I'm so macho. I was able to do deep margin acquisition, right? Oh, don't spill the coffee. What do you have in this evening, Nick?
A traditional G&T, my friends.
There you go. So it's coffee over here because we don't drink tea because, well, we wouldn't go there, okay? You know why we're not? Yeah, okay.
That was our biggest worry. I mean, the UK is still in lockdown. No restaurants, no barbershops, hence this extended hair that I've got at the moment. And we got lucky because my wife put in an order of about 5,000 tea bags and 20 bottles of gin. So we're okay for lockdown at the moment. Our local chippy's open so we can still get our fish and chips. So we're okay. Another couple of months of this I can handle.
Good. So sometimes when I'm showing what I think is a deep, tough case, and then I'll look at one of your cases and I think I'm a baby. Because your deep cases, okay, those are really deep cases.
Really deep. But I tell you, when you're wearing these massive FFP3 masks and these gowns, and you've got these deep furcation cases, it's like Rocky running up the stairs with the bin liners on. I am sweating like crazy sometimes with these things, man. So dentistry, whoever says it's not a good workout, I disagree.
So the other thing that's been interesting, you know, one of the great things about this family of all these Bioclear clinicians is that we're able to kind of hang out and get to know each other. And so, you know, we've been working together for quite a while, but one of the interesting things about being over there across the pond is you are in Europe, but apparently not of Europe, right? You're in Europe and not of Europe, but layering is kind of a religion in a lot of places around you, like Italy. And so I got to tell a funny story because when you started injection molding, I'm sure that people said, hey, what's wrong with you? Why are you not, you know, layering, right? Something complicated, because you're a fancy guy. You're a fancy pants guy. I'm sort of a meat and potatoes guy. I want them to get to know what a fancy pants British guy, what kind of practice you have. But I'll tell a little story. So Artie Volker, you know, bread and butter American dentist, posts a black triangle case on this site where some Italians go. And I didn't get the translation yet, but basically when Artie Volker published a case of injection molding of composite instead of layering whatever, the Italian doctor put on the post, it is too bad that they abolished the death penalty.
Oh man, you're kidding me. You're kidding me.
So they were so upset that he did not layer this case that he deserved the death penalty. So I got to ask you, have you run into anything like that? Because it's very steeped in the culture to, you know, to layer and do all this stuff, even though you treat a lot of, you know, gross decay. So tell me, have you caught in a lot of flack or periodically gotten flack?
Being totally honest, one of the first person to come up against resistance was myself. When Jeremy and you guys first showed me the technique about 7 years ago, it must have taken me 2 years from getting the stuff and buying the equipment to actually trusting the system, because I've always been very artistic. I like my Fisher patterns and I do a lot of ceramic and composite work, and it's always been layered. So it took me a long time myself. So I'd be a hypocrite if I said, oh, you know, I've been doing this since day one. I had to really battle with myself to change. And whilst I still like to maintain my kind of aesthetic edge on it, I've adopted so much of the principle. I mean, you've really turned my head when I had the pleasure of coming to train with you guys in Seattle. You know, no sharp margins, open cavities with infinity margins, rounded, blasting the biofilm, all the principles that you set out then, I think, are really cottoning on. And it's very similar and translates to even minimal prep onlay work. It's the same principles. And one thing that I love what you taught me is putting the tooth in compression, not tension. Not just for teaching dentists. When you explain that to patients, they totally get it. And I see a lot of patients in the building trade and engineers. And when I explain that to them, they look at the tooth next door with a DO composite, which is cracking, and said, oh my God, totally makes sense. You know, there's no difference. Dentists are not rocket science. We're just micro engineers, and we're still a slave to the normal forces of everything that, you know, nature has to deal with.
You know, it's funny because this whole concept of engineering, it was one of the Alan Killistoff from University of Alberta. We were talking to a bunch of GPR students and faculty to get them sort of on board about thinking about this compression versus tension. He says, hey, people for some reason, dentists think for some reason, the engineering that exists outside of the mouth has no impact inside the mouth. In other words, inside the mouth, the gravitational force within our mouths has a different pattern of engineering outside the mouth. No, it's just compression or tension. So I tell us a quick story, then we got to get going. I had a dentist fly in from Minnesota, and her teeth were wearing, and she'd been equilibrated several times, and then she had these ditches from so much equilibration on her lowers, and they were starting to break. I finished the case 5-6 hours later. The first thing she said to me, she says, my teeth feel stronger. That was her first response. My teeth feel stronger after injection overmolding. And I've heard that multiple times. A tooth in compression just feels different.
Yeah, no, you guys have certainly turned my head. I can't deny. I'm not easy to change my mind, but I have to say it's been fantastic.
So when Nick came to the Learning Center, we took an egg beater to his brain, but then later, we'll tell the story at the end, we took you to a hillbilly bar where you learned about pull tabs.
Oh,
and
man.
Then the best was when you were watching the baseball game, you were so confused. So we're going to tell your first exposure to American baseball, how you thought that they kept score in baseball.
Oh man, pull tab. I'm still clocking for my pull tabs, man. I've tried scratch cards. I'm trying the lottery. It's just not the same. I can't get my fix.
All right, so here we go. We're going to run through this real quickly. Nick's going to show a case, talk about his experiences, and then we're going to have some fun in the wrap up. Hey man, I wish we could do this every day. It sure is good to see you, Nick. All right, here we go.
You too.
All right, so here we go. So Nick, can you see that on your screen? Okay, time to step it up. Now, a lot of the little colloquialisms that exist in the UK don't transfer back and forth from England. So Nick, what does it mean to step it up? So what would be your guess? Nick, give us a translation. If you were like some hipster guy in London, which you are, what would that mean?
It's time to up your game. Bring your A game. We're kind of getting all this terminology from you guys slowly. We're a few years behind.
No. We're grabbing everything because we're watching Downton Abbey, and then there's this new British show. We're obsessed with the Brits. We really are. All right. So time to step it up or bring on your A game. Okay, here we go. All right. So we're going to be talking about solutions to basic stuff. And you and I talked about this, Nick, is that a lot of when we used to lecture, and we used to lecture to huge rooms of 500 or 600 people, it's kind of a show. I don't know how much learning actually happens at a lecture. And then you're doing the same thing, Nick. You can talk about it at the wrap up. You're teaching more now. You're teaching smaller groups. So you've gone from a lecturer to a teacher. And then at some point with hands-on classes, you're just facilitating learning with experiential things, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so you look at a situation like this, it's like, how did that happen? And if a dentist is having this, if we're having these kind of problems, a big show and talk is not going to fix this, right? Because there's a series of things that are broken here. But one of the things that happened to this dentist is this was probably a sectional matrix, but the matrix didn't get seated deep enough as part of it. And with Bioclear, the number one thing is the way we avoid overhangs with Bioclear, because there's not a definitive margin, it's an infinity edge, is the matrix has to seat deeply. A lot deeper than we thought. If the matrix seats all the way to the attachment, we win the game. Well, the matrix didn't seat here. So we're going to talk about the evolved matrix. How long have you had these prototypes, Nick?
Probably about 2 months or so, I'd say. And I've had some good experience with it. I've learned so quickly with them. They are awesome, especially the pink. I'm in love with the pink bands. They are brilliant.
Well, you're kind of a pink guy anyway, right?
There we go.
I'm the guy that likes the pink Cosmos, so I'm not. All right. So there's the pink and the blue. The pink we'll describe here in just a minute. Nick really likes that. So the blue has the normal emergence profile and curvature that we have with the BioFit matrix. The difference is that they come all the way up to very tall numbers, and they're colored, so now you can see them. So having these colored in the back of the mouth with the numbers on there, how helpful has that been, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're trying to peel away the matrix on the side, it's nice to have that color. But just the shape of them, like the shape is awesome. And for me, it's nice to have the numbers on there. I generally don't have a problem with my numbers, so I didn't have much of a problem before with them.
I did.
But I'd certainly the shape of them and the colored tabs at the top, I do like.
Okay, so the evolved blue, and that's the way we call them, evolved blue and evolved pink. The evolved blue is about the same general shape as the BioFit matrix, because that's been very, very popular. We love that shape. It has a width that's a little bit tight, so it kind of snaps on a molar. You have to stretch it to fit on a molar. And then we have some cases where we needed something a lot broader. So the pink is really broad, okay? And which comes with territory, is basically quite flat compared to the blue. So these are all the heights that we see for the Evolve. And I'm going to talk to you about what heights that you've been using in your practice. The pink comes in a more limited range because it's a matrix that we don't use as often unless you're Nick Setti and you're using it more often. So for the time being, these are the three sizes of the pink as far as the height. So time to step it up. So this is a preoperative radiograph. And when we look at a preoperative radiograph like this, we can see the decay. It's cavitated up high, but then it's going to be deeper inside. And so we'll talk a little bit about modern cavity preps. We're here most to chit chat, and there's a lot of content that you and I can teach later or share later. But basically, this is where most sectional matrix band stops, because with Toffelmeyer's, did you ever use Toffelmeyer?
Yeah.
Are you old enough?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I've been
Okay.
using sectional matrix, but definitely that's one of the issues when you've got circumferential bands. It's a pig to deal with.
But when you had a stiff Toffelmeyer, you could drive it all the way almost to the attachment because it was like a knife. Remember that? You go, and you jam that thing down. Well, sectionals don't go down like that. So our job is to go from here down to there. And so if we can get the matrix 2 millimeters deeper interproximally, we're going to have better contacts. We're going to stop overhangs. Almost every time I see a problem with composite, especially with Bioclear, the matrix didn't seat deep enough. So let's talk about how to get that thing to step it up and to go the distance. We've got to get that matrix deeper. So here is the BioFit 8 millimeter on that case. Now, normally, Evolve Blue, sorry, on that case. Normally, I would use maybe a 6.5, but I need that apron to go deeper. And so there's an apron on these matrices. We'll talk about what that thing looks like. There it is. So here's the apron. And on this, it's almost a couple millimeters deeper. So it's 8 millimeters from the edge of the apron to the fold in the tab. And so what that looks like clinically is I've got an apron that's going 2 millimeters deeper than it used to. Now, can you see on the corners that the clamp would fight the seat of the sectional? So you can see how that, in this case, that apron is going to be super helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Is that clear, Nick?
Yeah, Deb, we used to have to trim them before quite often. This makes that easier.
It's harder to trim a matrix than you think.
Oh, yeah.
Plus, human beings were lazy. I mean, do you change your own oil in your automobile?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
You farm that out. Yeah. So we're lazy. All right. So anyway, there's the 8 millimeter. It's going to go nice and deep. There it is. This is going to be a 3-point spot weld. The twin ring separator's in place. There's the finished result, and nice broad contacts slightly. Now, what we want to do is we're going to do the push-pull spot weld technique every time because we want them to have the contact be slightly concave. In nature, they're usually only concave or convex surfaces. So I actually want to make a small concavity on the BioFit by doing the spot weld push-pull. That creates a much broader contact. All of my crowns and onlays today have a slightly cupped contact to increase the surface area of the contact. That's just how human beings are. If you look at teeth and look at extracted teeth on some old guy, the contacts are cupped after 40 years. They start out like this, but then they look cupped. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have point contacts with your crown or bridge, or do you try to make them a little bit more cupped and broad?
I didn't think about that, but it makes sense what you're saying. I mean, I've been using the push pull, obviously, but I didn't actually think about that. That's a good point you make.
You know, it's amazing. We do these things and we don't think about those simple mechanical things. I mean, you're a smart guy, you know, and when you, with that British accent, you sound even smarter. Okay. So,
It's all a facade, Dave. It's all a
you were
facade.
smart. No, you're a smart, clever guy, but you don't think about this stuff. So these simple concepts are the things that we're just like, we're operating up here. We got to be thinking down here. Anyway, there's the pre-op. There's the post-op.
Nice.
Now that is slight. Thanks, Nick. That's actually slightly concave. If you were to extract that tooth, you'd see a slight dimpling. When you teach your classes, extract the tooth, and if you do the push-pull right, it'll have a slight cup. It won't invert. Now, inverting is the end of the world. Slight cup, okay? Now, here's a little other thing. Here's the post-op, okay? Here's the post-op with high contrast. A lot of doctors are looking at the radiographs in high contrast. Bad idea. That contact looks open, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So when you get an x-ray and somebody goes, the contact's open, but it snaps floss. No, that's a normal radiograph. And now not only does the contact look open, but the crown margin looks open. So, people aren't thinking about the fact that these digital x-rays are weird, okay?
It's
look
just
at
a
that.
three-dimensional image of a three-dimensional object, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it doesn't.
So, I mean, look at the contact and you say, oh yeah, I like it. And then it's bam. I mean, you could hear it all the way in London. Okay. That's how loud that contact was. But if, you know, once again, yeah, don't do that. Okay. Knock that off. There's my cavity prep. There's the little Clark class 2 divot where we goes deeper internally than externally, infinity edge. That's what this thing looked like, but we had to get that apron deep, right? Okay. We need color. So, I had somebody who says, I'm using, with the old matrices, I'm using the blue ones, even though I like the HD ones better because I couldn't see them. They were invisible. So the color is helpful. The color tab actually helps me to know if it's centered because it's so bright in the mouth. There's other things going on. The matrix moves, man, that tab is, I can see it. Okay. Now you say you don't need the color. I need the
Oh,
color.
I like the color. It's the numbers, but the colors, like I said, for centering, the color is actually really useful. Because
Okay.
I actually got caught out a couple of times in the past with the seating. So the color is
Okay.
actually really useful.
Oh, it was the numbers that you didn't need so
Yeah.
much. Yeah. Because
Yeah,
you're less
great.
remedial than I am. It's okay. All right. And then, yeah. So, and with the black triangle matrices, the colored tab, it made it really helpful. It just, as soon as I saw those colors, I just felt calm. Like this matrix is fighting for me, right? Instead of against me. But I'm an emotional guy. All right. I want to know how tall the matrices are. Apparently Nick can just see it. I want to know how tall they are, right? Sometimes the boxes spill, all right? And then you got to sort them out. People would call us and say, I spilled my 75 matrices on the floor. What should I do? Then we just say, your connection is bad. What do you do? Figure it out. There's an hour of your life you're not going to get back.
Yeah,
so the color, the color is helpful, right? Now, the other thing about the lettering is I can see if I'm going to trim the thing or do something weird, all the little matrix, all the little adjustments or little holes that we punch on a terminal tooth to spot weld the matrix in, having those numbers there is actually pretty helpful for doing little MacGyver things. We'll talk about MacGyver later. You don't know about MacGyver, but we know about MacGyver. Okay, so you said this, when you're taking the matrix off, as soon as you fill a biofit matrix or evolve normally a totally clear matrix, it's like an aquarium. When you fill it with water, you can't see the walls anymore. So you were talking about once you injection mold a tooth, it's hard to see where the matrix is to peel it off sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So the colors and the lettering helps you to sort of take the matrix off. I mean, just it's all the little things.
Yeah, no, it does. It just makes the process a lot more efficient, especially, definitely.
Okay. So like I said, the blue is kind of an upgrade of the regular biofit. The shape is very similar, but it has for deep margin acquisition. Obviously, for deep margin acquisition, we pack the cord, pull it out. I'll show that. Then the tab can go nice and deep. Sometimes the clamp won't allow the matrix to seat, and that's what we showed you. So you have to trim the corners off, and we'd rather not trim the corners off. So on the evolved matrices, sometimes I have to trim away the flange if it's, if it's not helping me, but that's actually for me is easier to do. All right, so here's a tough case for me, not for you, Nick.
No, that looks really tough, man.
I feel good. Can I be an honorary British dentist today?
Oh man, yeah, that's proper. That's proper British teeth right there.
Okay, she's 90 years old and she's got deep decay, and I don't want to extract this tooth because it's going to happen on a 90-year-old. Then she'll get caries on the other tooth. And so anyway, there it is. Here I am, deep margin acquisition. I've created a lateral cuspal overlay. I've packed the cord. I pulled it out. I blasted everything, but that's a deep case, and there's a clamp there. So I got the matrix in. It wasn't easy. Now we're going to talk about your case more in depth. That's the 9mm. There we go. And hey, it's beautiful. Wow. Yeah, it's fun.
I love the 9mm edition. It's brilliant. In the past, I was having to use an anterior Bioclear matrix for my deep cavities. And so I literally turning it and inserting it vertically. So having the 9mm is great. And for cases like that, look at that, that is incredibly deep.
Yeah, and I thought we would almost never use the 9s. I'm using them all the time.
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially for second molars.
So the pink, all right? So basically the pink for me, I use it a lot less often, but it's funny how doctors love certain matrices. I pretty much only use it on maxillary molars, on broad teeth, which is typically maxillary molars, teeth with root proximity, typically maxillary molars, very flat teeth, typically maxillary molars, and it comes in the deep margin acquisition of 9. If it is anything else, if you need a 5 or a 7, you'll just trim something else because it only comes in 3 heights. So here we go. This is a case where it wasn't really so much root proximity, but the head matrices had inverted each other because the teeth were very broad. So let me show you the case here. That's a broad tooth. The mesial of the first molar, the maxillary tooth is a rhombus. You knew this, right? If you didn't, you got to say it because it makes me sound smart, right? It's a rhombus, okay? So it's wider on the mesial half of the tooth, okay? And so the matrix inverted when they did the second one. And so I had to redo this. I had to flatten the other tooth out. And then that's a broad tooth. And any normal sectional matrix is going to invert there because of how broad the tooth is. This is not really a root proximity case. It's a big, fat, wide rhombus case. So once again, a normal matrix would invert. So here's all the steps. ABT, always be teaching. There's what we call the ROB, river of blood, right? When I take the pre-wedge out, pack the cord, release the ligament, sand the neighboring tooth, blast, and optimize the contact. There's that great big broad pink. Once the separator goes on, it'll finish wrapping the tooth. And there's my 3-point spot weld. You can see 2 of the 3 spot welds are here and here. That's going to create a slight concavity. And with the pink, man, you got to pull on it because it doesn't have a lot of curve, right, Nick? The pink doesn't have a lot of curve. So you really need to be aggressive with the spot weld. And there's the push-pull, and there is the post-op. And so now we're going to talk about this when we talk about yours. When we burnish a contact, radiographically, they always look close because they're kind of mangled. With Bioclear, we're getting just a kind of a tangent here. And so the x-rays don't look as overlapped or mangled or whatever, but they're closed, they're healthy. So that's the before and after radiographs on that deep case. And we need tall matrices more than we thought, right? So, I love this 9mm matrix. I had no idea. So for me, if it seems pretty tall, just get a 9. And then if it's too tall, you can just trim it back because you don't want to pull the matrix out of the box because you cannot autoclave mylar matrices. So sometimes I just pick a little bit longer and trim it if I guessed. But we're going to start doing more measuring so that I can keep up with you. All right, one last case. I'm going to do a vertical dimension. I just want to add volume. I want to put a great big tall aquarium around the tooth. In the past, Nick, I would have used an anterior matrix for this, but I took a 9mm blue Evolve and just trimmed the apron back a little bit because I didn't need the apron. And that gave me the ability to add 3 millimeters to this bicuspid because I'm opening the vertical dimension on this case. And it, so much easier having something that actually was shaped like a posterior.
That is cool. Very, very
And
cool.
just for you, I used extra white. Okay.
That is very cool.
All right, that's it. So let's chat for a minute, and then we're going to put your case up here. Let's. Do you want to go ahead and get your case up right now, Nick? Let's just do that. Cool. Then we'll go into chit chat.
So Bioclear is badass. I have certainly seen the light in the last few years for sure. And injection molding as a concept for me makes so much sense. And having this monolithic structure, the same way we have monolithic lithium disilicate onlays, the same way we want monolithic zirconia crowns. Anytime you have an interface between a material, you're going to bring in some problems. And as Dr. Clark rightly said, you know, if you've got metal matrices, then the issue is whenever you have these kind of convex adjacent surfaces, root proximity and deep curvatures, you're going to burnish it. And you're going to end up with this really crazy shape, which, yes, may look great on a bite wing, but clinically, it's impossible to clean. So the nice thing about what I found in my trial of these new matrix systems is we get to have something which, for a case like this, is super useful. So this is the patient that I've stabilized her perio. You can see we've got roughly 40–50% bone loss on that second molar. Long matrix required, and you can see just how close those roots are. It's like God has just planned that I'm going to get absolute bastard of cases all the time. I never get these lovely easy MOs and DOs. It just doesn't happen with me. I always get the ones that have got the root proximity, 9 millimeters. It's like I put an advert out for that. But essentially, when you put that matrix in, you're going to end up burnishing it if you were using a metal. And you're going to have a gap at the cervical region because there's no space there. And where the adjacent tooth kicks out, you're going to have a weird inward convex shape, and then it's going to kick out again. And like Dr. Clark showed you, you're going to end up with a restoration, which is going to be all kinds of problems with overhangs to clean. We just don't want that. So in this case, and I did this yesterday actually, and we're doing a cuspal overlay on the whole tooth. And what I love about these pink matrices is the shape, nice broad contact. And you can see, to help myself out, I've adjusted with a disc, just like Dr. Clark said, on the adjacent tooth to reduce that bulge. And now we can see already I'm going to have a nice broad contact. But because I'm doing an overlay, this new little wraparound that you guys have added is super useful because it takes some of the thinking out of me trying to rebuild those cusps, which freehand, as we know, is not fun. So having that nice form for the mesiobuccal and mesiopalatal cusp has been really nice for me to have. I like to use on the case, yes.
Mesiopalatal?
What am I meant to say?
It's the mesiopalatal.
Oh, sorry. I forget who we're talking to. Yeah. Mesiopalatal. Palatal. There we go. I like to use a little bit of white tint just where we've got brown remnants of caries, just so that it doesn't show through. Because when we're using the Filtech one, it's a beautiful material. But as with any composite, if you've got a very dark stain, it may show through. This doesn't, for me, compromise the integrity of the injection mold because it's only covering a small area as such there.
You know, because heaven forbid on the occlusal of a second molar, you have a tiny bit of brown.
I know, right? I know. But what I have changed, Dave, I mean, you've seen all my anatomy. This still hurts me a little bit, having so little fissure patterns on my teeth. I still battle with this, but I'm becoming a lot more accustomed to it. But what I want everyone to look at is look at that contact. Look at the broad contact. Look at the wraparound. We've essentially avoided a crown and we've rebuilt this tooth and given someone a cleansable contact. It really is life-changing dentistry. Now, typical, the patient comes in, this is a dental therapist, and he comes in and says, Nick, I think I've got a small hole on my upper left six. I was like, oh, no worries. I'll just see you at lunch, you know, small hole coming from another dental professional. He knows what he's talking about. Have a look in the mouth and you just think, oh, come on, man, seriously? Right, cancel the afternoon. This shit's going to get real. And I love this case because this points out all the issues we have when we're dealing with a big, chunky posterior upper tooth. Now, this is what I want everyone at home to realize when you're watching this, is it's very easy to drill and fill. But essentially, don't worry about the polishing, don't worry about anatomy. That will all come. It's three basic principles you all have to pay particular attention to. The biofilm. If you have biofilm, it will not stick. We are not magicians. I am not Houdini. I've got to get rid of that biofilm. Secondly, look at that big booty on the second molar. With that sticking out, there is no chance in hell a matrix band is going to create a lovely rounded contact. We're going to have, as Dr. Clark said, this mangled shape.
And so here's the thing, Nick, is that I'm looking at all of the natural contacts now. So I'll look at a whole bunch of bite wings and then I'll say they got caries here and there. Why do they only get caries here and there? Invariably, the preoperative contact was one of these weird things, or a kissy contact, right? The big, broad two surfaces coming together and staying together and coming apart, they don't get decay. So you kind of wonder if that natural contact is less favorable than one that's like a big evolved contact. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Start looking at those and help me out here on that.
Yeah, we'll do. And like I said, it's key that we look to adjust that. And
or we're just going to replicate it.
Yeah. And the last thing is, especially in deeper cases, upper molars, where you've got the buccal roots and the palatal root, you're going to naturally have this Pac-Man style root concavity the deeper you go. And if you don't pay attention to that now with the right wedging, with the Bioclear deep caries wedge, with the double convexity on it, then you're going to end up with problems. So you've got to deal with these three issues first before you start looking at your Rockstar polishers and your Magimix paste. They're all lovely, but this is the real stuff right here, first of all. And actually, this was my first case with the Pink Evolve, and I didn't trust the system. I didn't trust the band. So I actually didn't, you'll see in a minute, I stopped short and then tried to add a bit of composite because I didn't trust the shape of it. But essentially, if I don't correct this, we're going to have that big problem. So I did all the basic steps right. I do my sandblasting. I use a disc to adjust the adjacent tooth. Then we put a Pink Evolve and a Blue Evolve. We used a shorter one on the mesial aspect of 5, but I used the big deep 9mm on the distal aspect. And I got a okay result, but you'll see the contact on the buccal aspect where I didn't trust the shape, it comes in a bit too quick because I stopped short. Now, since I've realized this, I trust the shape now. So I've learned my lesson, but this is just to show everyone out there that, look, as much as I love doing nice anatomical cases, I'm happy to show my journey because I don't want people to think that I just tried a matrix and it was perfect. You live and you learn. You know, I'm a real dentist. I have real failures, right? Anyone that says they don't have failures is talking out where the sun doesn't shine, which is quite often in the UK. So essentially, we can see that it's a really useful matrix. But what I love is this. This is my last case, Mastering the Madness. This is beastifications on proper British teeth. Try and say that quickly. So I get a patient that comes and says, oh, doc, I had a root canal filling a couple of weeks ago and my endodontic specialist says I need a composite. I'll take an X-ray. I'm thinking, yeah, you might need a composite. Yeah.
It looks like they took a little piece of aluminum foil and just stuck it in there.
Oh, man, yeah.
No, aluminium foil, right?
Aluminium, there we go. So this is a really important case that I've learned anecdotally as well. I was really happy with this case. But essentially, the most distal tooth in the arch is the hardest tooth to isolate and get a good matrix band round. You know, it's not easy. So we know that wisdom tooth, the 8, has mesial caries. We can see it. It's a perio-involved tooth. We're going to lose that wisdom tooth. But before I take it out, I'm going to use it to my advantage as anchorage for my isolation. So don't just get the healing forceps out and crack on. Wait, use this to put your rubber dam on because this gives me a chance to use a matrix with a natural curvature rather than a Sequeland or a Toffelmeyer. And in this case, the gingivae, where he's had this crazy filling in there, the gingivae had grown into that concavity and they were on fire. So I had no chance of getting a rubber dam on initially. So I used a diode laser just to get away that inflamed tissue. And don't be scared, things grow back. It looks nasty, but I just tell the patient it's going to feel like an ulcer for 3-4 days and it will heal. So I do my lasering. The problem is once you laser away your gingivae, you've got no spongy, nice rubber gingivae to hold the apron of your Bioclear matrix.
So when I see one, because I've seen this case, you showed me once, I thought you were just sloppy right here in the furcation. I thought that the Teflon was just sitting in the tooth. My eyes were not ready to see that you had actually gone into the real root furcation. I mean, you are way up in this. You are way high.
This is 10 millimeters down. You'll see on the radiograph afterwards. So that PTFE tape has been put right into the furcation because I've used my PTFE to create a fake gingiva. And that's going to then act as a little tug to hold that apron in place. Otherwise, there'll be no friction and the apron's just going to come straight out again. This then allows me to put that 9 millimeter deep down. I hardly ever double wedge. I always just use one wedge, but because I couldn't get a separator on this case because of the clamp position, I have just semi-pressed in a wooden wedge from the palatal aspect purely just to stop the matrix moving when I'm injection molding, not because it's giving me much else of a purpose there. Then we injection mold, and I was over the moon with the shape I got with that. I was buzzing, and look at that wide contact from there. It was really cool. But just to show that, you know, I'm a functional dentist as well, you can see from the palatal aspect where I've cut the gum away, but look at that form all the way down. When we take off that wisdom tooth, when that's extracted, that gum's going to heal around there beautifully. But even with careful occlusal adjustments, we've managed to still maintain a 3-point contact. So I've saved this patient from the cost of a crown, the biological issues I'd have to deal with by extracting the wisdom tooth first, and also it's a nice cleansable margin. So it's very, very clever what's been created here. And if you follow the steps, none of this type of case is easy, but it's now possible. Whereas before we're looking at, you know, vertical preparation crowns and all kinds of invasive dentistry. We don't need that anymore.
Nick, okay, so I'm going to interrupt here for a minute. A lot of people, and I wrote an article that sometimes people in Europe call the United States amputation nation, because in North America, we see so much amputation of healthy tooth structure, crown, 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 crown. Here's the problem. The mesial half of the tooth is all you got going here. And if you do a full crown, prep the mesial, what do you got?
Just composite and holding on for dear life.
Holding on for dear life. So
yeah.
I always look at a case like this and say, apparently the system is working. Apparently the remainder of the shell has value. Let's reinforce the shell. Let's let the shell help to retain the restoration. Let the restoration protect the shell. And these things can go the distance because there ain't much left here.
And there's a lovely article in the European Journal by these Italian chaps, Getzi et al. In 2019. And the problem with doing a crown on a case like this is you're going to be subgingival. And how are you going to clean that excess cement on the terminal end tooth? You're going to get not a true invasion of biological width. It's going to be excess cement. A lot of the times we say we've invaded the biological width. It's not true. There's just excess cement. But the nice thing about composite with a well-adapted matrix band is we are totally subgingival here, but it's well tolerated because it's smooth. There's no ledge. So the body has no problem with working around that. It's when you have rough edges and bits of glass armor, cement, or whatever you're cementing with, that's when you get a world of hurt later on. So we can see here 10 millimeters with a natural curve on which will be a terminal end tooth. And I was really happy that we managed to achieve that and hopefully give this patient a few years out of a pretty solid tooth now. And that's pretty much what I wanted to show from my experience so far.
That's an inspirational case, Nick. And I think that it's helpful for people that have never done a case that difficult to say, that dude can do it, I'm going to do it. I mean, part of us pushing each other is when I see you go that deep, it's like, okay, I can do this. I'm not going to be a baby. I'm not going to let that guy show me up. Right? So sometimes competition is a good thing. And I think that we push and inspire each other. And that's the beauty of us all, you know, helping each other along. We're pushing and pulling each other. And it's been fun, man.
The goal is the same for all around. We're pushing each other. The goal is the same. And we've realized now that implants are great. They're fabulous, no doubt about it. But everyone's seeing problems after 7 years with implants. You know, implants are not for life. So if I can give my patient 10 years, hopefully more, but if I can give them 10 years, then I'm delaying that clock of 7 years when the implant eventually goes in. And the soft tissues and the bone will be in a healthier way than they are now. So nothing in dentistry is permanent. Everything is provisional, but we're trying to make these provisionals last as much of a lifetime as we can.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing is, people will accept compromises to keep what they have. People hate to give up something in exchange for something that might be great, right? If I can keep what I've got, even though it's not perfect, it may not last forever. If I can get 5-10 years of comfort from this tooth, I really don't want the healing force. That's funny. Okay, so we got to tell a quick story about when you came to Tacoma and we took you to the Hillbilly Bar and you got pull tabs and some guy tried to punch you out, I think. We were watching a baseball game. And now we have the Seattle Seahawks, and there was a guy from Amsterdam who thought that they were the Seattle Seabirds. Okay, no, it's Seahawks, not Seabirds. Just to clarify. And then you were watching a baseball game, which I don't think you'd ever seen baseball because you're watching cricket or rugby or I don't know.
No, we play the proper football here, David. None of that stuff where you can hold the ball. It's with your feet only. I don't know what you guys are doing there with all these pads on and the helmets. Rubbish.
So we're watching the baseball game and you're talking to the guy who thought that the Seahawks were the Seabirds because he's from Amsterdam, right? And you're watching the guy, the hitter, right? And you're going now, and you're explaining to the guy from Amsterdam how to score baseball. And you're going, I think if he hits it to the field over there, he gets 2 points. And if it goes over here, he gets 3 points.
I had no idea.
What you said?
I literally, it was over my head, man. Golf and basketball I can handle, but yeah, baseball was too much for me.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, take me to a cricket game, then you can.
Then even I wouldn't subject my worst enemy to that. I'm not a cricket fan. That is boring. But no, I had a great trip over there. It was fabulous to spend time with you guys in Seattle. And also Claire Burgess, who was over there, I met in Minnesota, and we had our 3M meeting over there, who's doing some fabulous stuff with you guys over in the UK. For anyone who wants to do the Bioclear Learning Center, Claire's got some great stuff going on here. Pleasure for me to be kind of starting to teach with you guys as well. I've got some great experience with the system now, and really excited to show to the masses that actually good, safe dentistry is more important than that 1 out of 10 fabulous anatomical case. And if we can raise the standard of dentistry across the world for the masses, then we're going to have a lot more fun over the next 10, 15 years.
Well said, Nick. Thank you so much for being our star today. And thanks for inspiring us. And tell your wife she gives a pretty good haircut, but hopefully you'll be able to get a proper haircut here in a few months, right?
Yeah, I hope so, buddy. And hope you guys staying safe over there. And I'm missing my trips to America. I'm hoping to get over there again soon and have a proper beer with you guys in person.
All right. And you know, my final farewell always to my Brit is cheerio, my friend. Nobody says cheerio anymore, do they?
No one says cheerio, but we'll do it for you, buddy. Cheerio.
Cheerio. We'll see. All right. I think we are back. We're good. Are we thumbs up? We have a bunch of great questions. Now, Nick is not with us right now because he's gone to bed since we did this webinar. So this was recorded and now I'm live to answer questions. I saw a whole bunch of questions at the in the Q&A. Now, do we have any capability for people to actually get on screen and talk to me, or we just need to answer their questions? Okay, it'll be just me. All right, so let's go ahead and open the Q&A and then you can continue to ask questions as we go along. Okay, so can they see these Q&A or is it just me?
Just you.
Okay, so Philip Schindler asked, how do you handle a deep decay adjacent to an implant crown where you cannot place a diamond wedge because it disappears under the crown? How are we going to wedge a tooth next to an implant crown? You know what? I haven't run across that ever. So I'm gonna defer. I'm gonna get back to you on that, and then we'll post that on the alumni page, and we'll post it on a couple other places. But let me tell you what you could do. And there's a couple of things that you could do. You could go in and spot weld the matrix buccolingually just to wrap it around the tooth, just to get a seal. The second thing you could do is you could take Teflon tape. I'm using a little bit more Teflon tape. It's just a plumber's tape. Twist it up, keep packing it in, and then do a flowable layer before you injection mold. Because if you don't have a wedge applying good lateral pressure, when you injection mold, it'll squirt out the gingival. So you've got to control the gingival, and it's probably going to be deep in a case like this. So you'll do a 2 or 3 millimeter gingival increment with the matrix gently tucked against the tooth, and then supported by this plumber's tape. You just wrap it up and keep stuffing it in there. And you can place a separator on a case where there's no wedge. We teach it at the Learning Center. It's called the wedgeless technique. So you could literally put the matrix on. Once again, we're answering the question, how do you handle deep decay adjacent to an implant crown? What you could do is just slide the matrix in deeply, put the separator on, and then stuff the Teflon tape, PTFE tape from the buccal and lingual until the matrix is pushed up against the neighboring tooth gingially, put a gingival increment in, cure it, and then injection mold. In fact, once that gingival increment is placed in, you might even be able to put a wedge in there, but with the implants, that sometimes doesn't have room. So I hope that helps. And if it doesn't, send me an email and we'll talk about it again. Okay. So next question is from Joseph Macy. It looks like, mention micron thickness of plastic, please. If not as thin as blue, are there plans for the blue? Okay, so the question is, David, we have 2 Bioclear thicknesses. We have the 50 micron, which was the original that we used, that was either clear or blue colored, blue in the posterior, and then the 75 micron. All of the 75 micron Bioclear matrices have that slight milky color to the mylar, so you know that it's HD. So all of the 75 micron has that slightly milky color to it, or it's not 100% clear, but it still has 98% light transmission. We just wanted to keep it clear. So Joseph wants to know, hey, David, I like the Bioclear blue. Are we going to be able to have the thinner matrix in these tall shapes and what we currently have with this new the new Evolve system? Okay, the question is, we don't have it right now in the 50 micron. So the answer is no, we don't have the Bioclear blue, the thinner one. That may be a possibility in the future, but what you can do and what we're teaching now is thinning the contact with what we call the sweet spot. So we're going to be having the next webinar, hopefully, or the next Bioclear show. We'll talk about how Charlie and I, and how we're teaching at the Learning Center to take a brownie on the inside or the outside of the Evolve matrix. You can thin it out. It just takes like 5 or 10 seconds. So we're going to thin the matrix. It has the best of both worlds. It's very, very thick where we need it to go sub G and hold the matrix and be nice and stiff, so we can really thumb it in there. But then we're thinning the contact area. Dr. Charlie Rigolato has been really pushing that. And so we'll have eventually a little webinar on how to thin the contact area so you get the best of both worlds. The thinness of a 35 micron mylar at the contact, but then thicker where you want it. So, so that is the situation to date. Okay, so James Kaiser. Now, are we going historically through these or answering the new ones first? Historically. Okay, good. So James Dale Kaiser says, hey, I recall a 2-point spot weld. Can you elaborate on a 3-point spot weld? So can we bring the microscope up or not? We can? Okay, so we're going to do the difference between a 2-point spot weld and a 3-point spot weld right now. Okay, so we talked about the 2-point spot weld. In a simple restoration, we're able to, in a simple restoration, and restoration is not very deep. Here it is. On a simple restoration, we're going to put our spot weld here and here, pull the matrix over, and that's a 2-point spot weld. So you've seen that, and people have understood that. In a 3-point spot weld, here's the problem that we face. So in a 3-point spot weld, we basically, the reason we call it that is because we want to be able to let your dental assistant know what's next. So if I have to layer, if the interproximal is deeper than 5 millimeters, which is definitely here, this is the go, no go probe. If it's deeper than 5 millimeters, which it is here, I'm going to have to layer this. So if I have to layer, then I'll do a 3-point spot weld. So let's just go ahead and knock it out right now. So what I would do is, I think that the proper matrix for this is, I think, an 8 millimeter. So I'm going to grab an 8 millimeter evolve. And I will slide it in here. So this is the difference between a 3-point and a 2-point spot weld. So I'm going to do a 3-point spot weld on this. This is one of the exercises that we teach at the Learning Center. So that is the 8. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the fluting wedge in here, because this is the deep carries or fluting wedge. So I will slide this in here. Remember, we always hold the tab down.
Can you see what color it is? It looks yellow.
So this looks yellow to you, but this is actually green depending on your monitor. So I'm going to bring this from the lingual, because that's the direction where the furcation will engage the furca on that. You can see that that's working out pretty nicely for me right there. But that is a very deep restoration. So I'll go ahead and put my twin ring on here. And now we're going to demonstrate the 3-point spot weld. So I'm going to put the separator to the mesial. Okay. I'm going to waggle my separator down. And man, look how wide open that contact is. That's a long ways from being sealed, right? So what I'm going to do now is a 3-point spot weld. So I need some adhesive on a micro scrubby. So let's imagine we've rinsed, etch, rinse, and dry. And so once again, this is deeper than 5 millimeters. I'm going to have to layer anyway, because I can only get 3 millimeters depth of cure. I can only get 5 millimeters depth of cure with the Filtech 1. So I would massage the Scotch Bond Universal into dent and tubules for 20 seconds, as we always do. Then we air thin and cure, more like a traditional class 2. All right. So we're going to cure that. So once again, this is a 3-point spot weld, because the restoration is too deep to do it in one shot. I've got to layer and do 2 shots. Whenever it's a 2-shot deal, now it's a 3-point spot weld. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll take some adhesive. Let me see the adhesive. And now here comes our 3-point spot weld. We'll bring our adhesive in. We'll bring our adhesive in. We'll get a little bit right there. We'll wet that area, and then we'll do our other 2 normal spot welds here on the buckle. I'm going to air thin, but not light cure. Then I'm going to need some heated bulk fill flow.
It's been heating for 2 minutes.
So I've got some heated bulk fill flow. I'm going to put my first spot weld right here. And I'm only going to put in just enough to basically seal the gingival. I don't want to block out my line angle areas, because I won't get good infinity edge. And then I'm going to use cold flowable at my 2 spot weld areas. We like the cold flowable because it doesn't slump, and it allows us to really get purchase on the mylar. Now I like to do it big here. You know, I like big hair. I'm going to do a big old spot weld here. I'll even put a little curb over here. And now I've got good containment. And that is my 3-point spot weld. So where are the 3 points of the spot weld? The gingival, because I have to layer, the buckle and the lingual. And then we'll go ahead and grab the push pull. I will pull the matrix over. And now it's got 3 areas of engagement to make sure that it's nice and stable, cure. So that, and do the buckle, now do the palatal. And then I'll pull I'll pull that out and I'll cure that. Now, on these deep, nasty cases like this, every once in a while, after I do whether it's a 2 or a 3-point spot weld, I'll look at the assembly. I always look at your assembly and say, do I love this thing? And in fact, it's okay, but I'm not completely in love with it. So this is a little bonus for everybody, okay? You can bust your spot weld loose if you don't like it. Because man, in a case like this where it's so deep, sometimes you know, like Nick was saying, man, don't give up. Go for it. So I'm going to actually break my spot weld loose. I'm going to pull this matrix over even more. And now I'm going to spot weld my spot weld. So I did a 3-point spot weld. And now I'm going to spot weld. I'm going to re-weld one of my spot welds. And now that's pushing the matrix further over. I'll come in with my push pull and I'll pull this baby over. And now I've really optimized my contact, that my contact's even broader, and cure. And come on out. And you know what? Just keep doing it till you love it. Because the more volume you build out here in that spot weld, the more you're able to push the matrix over. So I like it. So that was a bonus. So now we're ready to injection mold, because now the interproximal is 5 millimeters or less in depth. When I measure this, it's nice and shallow, ready to go. So that is the 3-point spot weld. I hope that made sense. All right. So Nancy Bollinger, you know, one of my great professors in dental school was Dr. Bollinger. He was in Pros at the University of Washington. He was the best. PTFE is the chemical name for Teflon tape. And I don't know, it's a very long chemical and I don't remember what it is. Someone can clarify it. It is Teflon tape. It comes from the hardware store. It's $1 for a roll and it'll last you forever. The Teflon tape is what we stuff into implants just to maintain that space in case we want to get access to the screw. And a lot of dentists in Europe and have really been excited about sort of balling it up and stuffing it in because it kind of sticks to itself. And the nice thing about Teflon is it's easy to pull out because it doesn't stick to anything. If you pack cord in there and leave it in, then it gets stuck in the resin. So PTFE, the plumber's tape is a pretty good thing, but it's technically called PTFE, but it's plumber's tape. Okay, can you please explain in more detail how you adapted the matrix in the deep distal furcation? So I think you're talking about when Nick did the case where he had that terrible fluting on the distal. So in reality, the matrix did not go into the last 1 millimeter or 2 of furcation. The Teflon, the Teflon tape, the PTFE, was the matrix. So he basically used that to go into that crazy invagination. The matrix seated right up next to it. So the last millimeter or 2 in the furcation was the Teflon tape, because no matrix was going to adapt to a crazy furcation that deep. So it was kind of like a second matrix. And I've extracted those cases out of the dentiform and it doesn't look too bad. I mean, it's probably better than a crown margin down there. So good. All right. Oh, Edward Jackson. I love you, man. Edward Jackson. I have a difficult time getting a tight contact when doing an MODO at the same time. Any advice? So Edward Jackson wants to know, I'm doing either back-to-back or an MOD, right? So here's what we know is that we have a whole section in the advanced class. If you ever get a chance, do the advanced posterior class. And we're teaching it online. Dr. Josh Solomon teaches the new online posterior certification class. We go over all of these quadrant strategies, but I'll give you the quick version of that is anytime we have to do 2 contacts at the same time, whether it's back-to-back, like an MODO or an MOD, your chance of getting a tight contact goes down. So let's talk about an MODO. So on an MODO, you're going to matrix and wedge the 2 approximating surfaces, put the separator on, you're going to fill probably the mesial first, take the matrix out, and then fill the DO. Because if you have back-to-back matrices, that's twice the space, and you pull them out, it's going to be tough to get a tight contact unless it's a perio tooth. What about an MOD? Same problem. So here's what I'm doing. I'll basically prep the mesial first, injection over mold the mesial, take the matrix wedge separator out, then do the distal and push that over. I really don't want to fight them at the same time. Now, if it's a child, if it's a kid, then the teeth move around. But if it's an adult with bone like mine on a 60-year-old, those teeth don't move around very well. So I'll try and break them up and really only restore it. So there's only one matrix at a time that's fighting for a tight contact. I hope that helps. Okay. Tuba Ajmal, can we get samples? I have a virtual session booked for June, but want to try these before that. Talk to the Bioclear people, and they have all the information about the new Evolve matrices. So I'm excited that that you've got the virtual session. Yeah. So Yeah, info@bioclearmatrix.com. They just put that up there, and the people can hopefully get you some of the evolved matrices. The evolved matrices are available right now in the US. How soon in England and Canada on evolved? Do we know yet? If you know somebody, you can, bring them over, but they'll be in England and they'll be in the rest of the world relatively soon. They just became available in the United States. Okay. My buddy Fred Marin, New York City, you are the man. Fred Marin says, is there any reason to use HD? Is there any reason to use HD posterior matrices? Will the evolved blue replace the HD? So the evolved blue matrix is basically just like the BioFit matrix. And so it just has color on it and a little bit more shape. So the BioFit is a great matrix. The BioFit, the evolved blue, is basically kind of replacing the BioFit, but you can still use the BioFit. It's a great matrix. But the evolve comes in so many heights, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it's just easier to see. It has a little more wrap, but basically it's the same HD material. So the BioFit and the new evolved matrices are all in the 75 micron. If you want thinner mylar, you can either thin it, which we're using a brownie on the inside of the matrix, just takes or on the outside just to thin the contact. Then it's even thinner than the blue, or you can go back to the original BioFit blue matrices that are 50 micron. Okay. Fred, I'm finding the subgingival apron is folding inward on seating. If there's not a lot of space at the cervical, any tricks to seat it without the folding? So Fred is one of these tried and true Bioclear guys who's always emailing me great questions. There's an apron on the end of the BioFit. Let me show you what that looks like. Can we show you that right now? So, like for example, on this 9 millimeter right here, there's an apron. Now, Fred, one thing is, if you got some of the prototype evolves, the apron was a little bit more curved on the original. So sometimes if that matrix curls under like that, when you're sliding the matrix on the tooth, what you'll need to do is, let's just kind of put it here. If you've got, if you're sliding an evolved matrix in and the matrix starts to curl under, all you've got to do, and I've done this a couple of times, Fred, is you've got to take the Explorer, and as you're seating the matrix, take the straight end of your Clark Explorer and then push it like that, so that as the matrix goes in, it slides over the margin of the prep. Because every once in a while it wants to snag, but that might have been a prototype thing. But every once in a while, I'll need to shepherd take the Explorer or a Hollenbach and basically guide the matrix past the margin so it can drop into that deep margin. Great questions, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I work really hard to build this stuff. It's fun to, David, okay, hang on a minute. Okay. Are there some samples we can try before purchasing? You'll have to ask Bioclear on that. They are the ones. Okay. info@bioclearmatrix.com. Yeah. And, I think that, if you talk to the reps, then you can probably sweet talk them into something, but the reps will help you on that. Jeremy Brown, I'd like to start using the Bioclear matrices. Are they as easy to use as regular metal matrices? Is there a learning curve? Hey, Jeremy, that's a great question. So let's go back to why we're using Mylar. We want to get away from layering. And so when we have a clear matrix, it allows us to do 3-point curing. So with a metal matrix, bulk filling is hard to do. It's hard to get the light in. It always makes us nervous. So Mylar allows us to get better depth of cure because we can cure from all angles. We can quit layering. Metal matrices in general, they're a little bit easier to use, but there's so many limitations to metal. And one of the other limitations to metal is it's not as smooth as Mylar. So when the Mylar comes off, it's a much better restoration. Here's the next thing. A metal matrix, you can only put so much shape in a metal matrix. Mylar is unlimited. These have way more curvature. So once you get past the learning curve, and there is a little learning curve, the Mylar beats metal in so many ways. I mean, you can still rely on metal for, for whatever reason, but it really handcuffs you because it just doesn't have as much curvature. We can't get the light in there. And ultimately the restoration is a lot smoother. So Jeremy, the thing that I would recommend is sign up for a live remote intro class, and you can learn how to get past the little learning curve. Now I'll tell you, the new Evolve matrices and the BioFit, the HD material is so strong that it's stronger than metal. You can take these and literally thumb them into place and they will not bend. So sometimes we'll pack the cord to get the gums away. We drop that thing in there. So there are some advantages because the new HD Mylar in some ways is actually easier than metal. The original thinner Mylar was harder to manage, but the HD is in some ways easier than metal. But for sure it's different. And doing a live remote class would be awesome to go get past the learning curve. And you know what else? People want free samples. I'll tell you what, if you sign up for one of these live remote classes, I mean, you got to pay for that. You get to keep some of the samples. So you want a free sample, you could definitely get some free samples in the live remote classes, and they should be switching over to the Evolve matrices very soon for live remotes. Okay. So Chris Nip, hey Chris, how you doing? You're showing up late. Come on, man. Chris Nip wants to know, what's the main difference between the Evolve matrix and then I think when he says HD stands for heavy duty. He's probably talking about the traditional BioFit matrix, both the molar and bicuspid that we've had for about 6 years. So I want you to watch the whole webinar because it's being recorded, right? Can they watch it later? Yeah, you got to see it because these are some great cases. And this Nick Setti guy from England, man, he's a lot of fun and he shows some pretty cool cases. So the BioFit was the molar matrix that we had that came in 4, 5, 5, 5, and 6, 5. We love the BioFit, but what we needed taller matrices. So now they come in and we changed the numbers to just 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So Chris Nip, the number one difference is I've got a 9 millimeter up to 9 millimeters, which is great. And then we said, hey, if we're going to have all these heights of matrices, we got to put a number on them. So they are numbered 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. There's a number that we're printing on the matrix. And then the tab is colored so you can see a lot better in the back of the mouth. And then the last difference is that they wrap a little bit more because we have some newer technology. So the wrap is just a little bit better on the Evolve Blue than the BioFit. And then the next difference is there's a whole brand new matrix called the Pink Evolve. And the Pink Evolve is a very unique matrix. It is nothing like any matrix we've had before. It's kind of like the broad flat molar from the old days. Oh, there it is. Oh, you can't. Can you go to the microscope real quick, Carissa? So this is the, and you have to watch the tape on this. This is the broad flat Pink Evolve. This is a prototype matrix. You can see it's much broader than the blue. So if I grab a blue, this is the standard sort of BioFit shape. If you compare these two, the pink is so much wider and flatter than the blue. Now, what are you going to use 90% of the time? You're going to use the BioFit blue, or excuse me, the Evolve blue. But there are times on a maxillary molar where you need a great big broad shape. So that's the pink. And there's basically the blue Evolve that's very similar to what you're used to. That was basically based off the BioFit shape. So you expand it over the molar and it fits great. But sometimes you need a really flat, almost like a Toffelmeyer matrix. So that's why we built the pink, okay? So Chris, that's a lot of questions. Hopefully that will help explain. All right, Joshua Kleederman. Can you suggest a technique for restoring a class 2 on the tooth adjacent to a crown? You're on the process of seeding. Okay, so I'm going to explain a couple things. Joshua Kleederman wants to know, can I suggest a technique for restoring a class 2 on the tooth adjacent to a crown? You are in the process of seeding. So if you're seeding a crown and you want to prep the neighboring tooth, I would actually just, I'd seat the crown and cut the prep and use the neighboring tooth. Like Nick talked about, if you're going to have a cavity next to a wisdom tooth, leave the wisdom tooth that you're going to extract to have something to hold the matrix in. So if I'm seating a crown, I would rather just seat the crown and cut the prep and then injection mold, and if it's a unilateral contact, you're going to get a great tight contact. Now, there are times if I'm seating a crown and the contact's a little bit open and I don't want to send it back to the lab, if I have a virgin tooth next door, I will blast that tooth, etch it, put some flowable composite, add a little contour, you can disc it back, and that'll save you from having to send the crown back to add a contact. Nobody wants to wait to have a crown contact added. So if the neighboring tooth is a virgin tooth, you can blast it. It's kind of like the opportunistic access that we teach at the Learning Center classes. But back to the original question, if I've got a class 2 and I've decided I want to prep the neighboring tooth, I'm going to just seat the crown and go in. Now, Joshua, at the in level 4.0, we teach what's called the opportunistic access. If you can come in when you're prepping a crown and you can come in from the side and not cut through the marginal ridge, okay, let's do that before you seat the crown. So this is you have an opportunity. It's open. So you're going to go into that class 2 from the buccal and lingual like a class 3. You'll blast it, you'll clean it, you'll put a matrix on there. And I use the pink Evolve for that, like the 5mm or the 6mm pink Evolve. Wedge it and just inject flowable in there. You don't even need paste. Peel the matrix off, disc it, and then seat the crown. Because if you have access, don't cut through the marginal ridge, but just come from the side like a class 3. Like I said, we teach that in the advanced posterior, and then you only need flowable because you're not chewing on it. But you can only do that if you've prepped the neighboring tooth for a crown. So that's a great question, Joshua. And you just did the patient a favor by not coming through the marginal ridge. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Raymond Kessler wants to know, do you still need to layer to use, do we need to layer to use evolved matrices? So I'm not quite sure I understand the question, so I'm going to answer it a couple ways. The evolved matrices come in 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, okay? If the go, no go probe, can you show this real quick? When you put this in the cavity prep, if you put this in the prep and it is 5mm or less depth of cure, you don't have to layer. So it doesn't have anything to do with the matrix, whether we layer or not, Raymond. The reason that we layer is because we're deeper than 5mm. So let's say the cavity prep was really deep, like down here. That's a no-go. That's a 7mm tooth. We have to layer. So I think there might have been a misunderstanding because the deep margin acquisition matrix, that version, the 7, 8, and 9mm matrices, that's deep. We have to layer for any deep restoration when the interproximal is deeper than 5, because that's the deepest we can cure with Filtech 1, which is our favorite bulk fill. Filtech 1 is a really beautiful bulk fill, unlike a lot of the sort of junky, grainy bulk fills out there. So at 5mm, when we have a clear matrix, is the max. So once again, Raymond, the decision whether we layer or not is based on, is the interproximal deeper than 5? If it's deeper than 5, yeah, we have to layer regardless of the matrix. So I hope that that's clear. All right, Charles LeBlanc. Hey, how are you? Charles wants to know, hey, David, you did not mention the metal on the matrices preventing the composite from being polymerized at the metal composite interface. Yeah, this is really interesting. They've done studies up at Dalhousie, and when you cure next to a metal matrix, people used to think that the metal matrix would reflect light in and help to cure the composite. We found the exact opposite to be the case at Dalhousie. What they found out was next to the matrix, because they dissolve teeth after they cure them, or dissolve the composite after they cure them in these samples, anything next to the metal had less polymerization. So not only does it block the light, but it actually sort of sucks the photons out. And so the composite right next to the metal matrix didn't cure as much. Now you can still cure the heck out of it. And obviously people are curing with metal matrices and they survive, but it is definitely robbing some of the photons of light, because the metal becomes like a photon sink where it doesn't allow the curing. So not only does it block the light from coming in, it actually pulls the light away from the composite when you're trying to cure, from the inside. So thanks, Charles. That's I can't believe you remember that. Tanya Hernandez, I'm new to the Bioclear method, looking forward to the virtual course in May. Do you always use retraction cord before using the matrix and subgingival decay? Tanya, you're paying attention. We've been fighting these class twos for a long time. And like we talked about in the class, in the old days, in the dark days, you'd take a Tafelmeier, and we would take that Tafelmeier and we would thumb it down. It would act like a knife because a Tafelmeier was stiff and sharp. And we could get down to deep decay with a Tafelmeier, but it had a bad shape and couldn't bulk fill because it was metal. But we actually got there. As soon as we got sectional matrices, we had no ability to drive the matrix deeply interproximally. So Tanya wants to know, do I have to pack cord before using these apron matrices? And the answer is no, you don't have to. But if you're deep, you're probably going to benefit from packing cord. So I didn't pack cord at first very often on deeper cases because I'm lazy like everyone else. But then the matrix didn't go as deep as I'd want, and the sides were kind of sitting up high. So if I'm even in a question, Tanya, pack the cord. Just pack the cord. It takes 20 seconds. Give me the cord. You pack it in, you pull it out, you've separated the ligament, the matrix just goes right near the bone. I mean, it's free money. It's a piece of cord, 5 millimeters of cord. It takes maybe a minute to soak the cord, pack it in, and pull it out. It just creates this beautiful trench. And so, Tanya, I am packing cord on these deep class twos more and more often, which allows the apron to seat beautifully. You know what? It seems like we're always in too big of a hurry to do it right the first time, but then we always find time to do it a second time, right? So I think that more and more of us will be packing cord to be able to get these matrices nice and deep, because that's the only way to get down deep, deep, deep on some of these cases other than Tafelmeier. So to answer your question, Tanya, no, you don't have to use the cord to get the apron to seat. It's going to depend. But if you put the matrix in and you just don't think it's getting deep enough, because I'd love the matrix to get 2 millimeters past the margin. I mean, if I'm 2 millimeters deeper than the margin, you're guaranteed an amazing margin with Bioclear. But if you're just past the margin, you might get an overhang. Remember, the deeper I go with Bioclear past the margin, the better the margin. And so don't be shy to pack some cord. And I didn't, I'm doing it more and more. Okay, so I'm getting the we're done sign. It's been great talking to everybody. I didn't get to Dr. Frank Milner's question. Sorry, Frank. We'll talk later. And I think that's everything. So folks, it's been great. And I look forward to your comments, and have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you next time.